This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening and welcome to the City of Warrenville Community Development and Planning meeting of the Committee of the Whole regular meeting on Monday, September 13th, 2021. Please note this meeting is being recorded. Also note it is the city's policy to require face coverings during all public meetings in City Hall, regardless of vaccinated status and social distance from others. Deputy Clerk Gravetti, would you please provide the roll call?
Mayor Brummel,
Here.
Alderman Anderson,
Here.
Alderman Ashour,
Here.
Alderman Berry,
Here.
Alderman Davalos,
Here.
Alderman Goodman,
Here.
Alderman Krischel,
Here.
Alderman Widener,
Here.
Alderman Wilson.
Here.
We have a quorum. I'll read the staff. City Administrator Coakley,
Here.
Assistant City Administrator White,
Here.
Community Economic Development Director Menser,
Here.
Deputy Public Works Director Coopler. I'm
Here.
sorry, not deputy. It's an old list. Finance Director Dahlstrand. Senior Civil Engineer Hawking.
Here.
Public Works Management Analyst Youngmeyer.
Here.
City Clerk Clark. And Deputy City Clerk Gravetti. I am here. Did I miss anyone?
Assistant Administrator White is also present. Oh, did she call you? Okay, I'm sorry. All right, I think you got everyone. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now is the time we set aside for citizens' comments. We'll hear any verbal or written comments from the public. Any citizen or any member of the public wishing to speak, please come to the podium, adjust the microphone, state your name, address, and offer your comments, speaking slowly and clearly. I'll call on one person at a time. Is there anyone here that would like to make public comment? Seeing none, do we have any email comments or anyone on the phone who would like to make comment? Okay, seeing none and hearing none, we will conclude the public comments, and now it's time for officials and staff members' comments, beginning with Mayor Brummel. Mayor, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I have several things this evening. First of all, I'd like to thank Chief Dina and the Warrenville Fire Protection District for providing our remembrance event for 9/11 on Saturday morning. Nicely attended, very nicely done. It was a true Warrenville event. It felt very good, so I wanted to thank them for making that happen. This past week, we had a couple of grand openings, one grand opening and one tour, I guess. Everton Flats Apartments, 248 high-end apartments on Route 59. A tour was involved there also. A very, very nice community over there. Talked to several people at the grand opening. Are just delighted to be part of the Warrenville community and in Everton. They are at this point 95% leased. Clearly, it's a well thought out community that is popular with professionals and others, and even some pre-retirees who are looking for a nice place to live without a lot of responsibility. So a very, very nice development. It was a nice event to attend their grand opening. Warrenville Horizons also is very close to having people move in. That's 71 senior apartments, Batavian and Butterfield intersection. We took a tour of that. Very, very well done. I can see that There's a reason that they have a waiting list of 103 people at this point. They're fully leased. There will be 77 new residents of Warrenville there. Some, of course, who are currently Warrenville residents are going to be allowed to stay in Warrenville because of that development. It's just a beautiful site with all kinds of opportunities to get out and walk around, and especially to enjoy the forest preserve and river. So I just wanted to say welcome to all of those folks that are moving into Warrenville Horizons. And finally, an event that is very successful every year is the document shredding and electronic recycling event. Just a reminder for that, that's going to be Saturday, September 18th. The police department hosts this. This is the second time they've done that. It will be at Bauer Elementary School South parking lot from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. or until the trucks reach full capacity. So I suppose it's a good idea to go early. Again, it's very popular. A lot of folks show up with their stuff. So detailed information can be gotten at our website. So keep that in mind. This coming Saturday, September 18th, document shredding and electronic disposal. Of course, if you have one of those big 200-pound TVs, that requires a call ahead of time and payment of a fee, sadly, to get rid of those things. But the smaller stuff, no problem along, bring it along. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Anderson?
Good evening. I just had one comment to make everybody aware. I had an opportunity to meet with a group today from the Kiwanis who are interested in forming a Kiwanis club here in Warrenville to support the Key Club at Wheaton Warrenville South High School. I was not aware. We actually have 325 students in the Key Club at the high school, and they're just looking for a Kiwanis program here in Warrenville to support the mentoring of that group. So if that's something that anyone listening would be interested in, their meeting is going to be tomorrow night, Tuesday the 14th at 6 p.m. at St. Irene's. And so I just think something, if that's after something you might have a passion about, that folks should consider it. That's all I have.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Berry?
I have nothing. Thank you.
Alderman Davalos?
Yes, I would just like to second the comments by Mayor Brummel on the 9/11 honoring ceremony. It was very, very good and moving, and I just am so glad that we did it. Also, I think this coming up weekend is Art on the Prairie. Is that right? And that's what I have on my calendar. Okay, so Art on the Prairie, I'm happy to say, speak to that because it is one of my very favorite events that we do in Warrenville. It's right there in front of City Hall and the library. There was an article about it in the Herald in a special section on summer events, and they described it very well as a juried art fair. And it's all kinds of arts, and all kinds of interesting things to look and purchase and food, and it is really a lot of fun. And so I encourage you all to go, kids too, and there's lots of activities, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
Thank you. Yes, many of the things I wanted to talk about have been mentioned. I think it's great that the art fair is coming up and that the Fire District's 9/11 event was so touching. But I do want to add one more thing, which is news from our neighbors at Fermilab. The Fermilab director, Nigel Lockyer, has announced his plans to step down after 8 years as the head of Fermilab. And there's a process going on between now and next April to look for his replacement. He's been a great person to work with on local issues and on supporting science education in Warrenville. And I just wanted to let you all know that this important change is happening at one of our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Krischel?
No comments tonight, thanks.
And Alderman Wilson?
No comments yet tonight. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll turn it over to City Administrator Copley. John?
Thank you. Hitting all the wrong buttons today. Just wanted to bring up a couple of things. Has been my practice. I was attending the virtual meeting briefing with the DuPage County Health Department this morning. It's down to once a month now instead of every week or bi-weekly as it was a year and a half ago. But I wanted to give a couple of quick notes about it. They emphasized that the vast majority of COVID-19 breakthrough cases, but especially the hospitalizations and unfortunately some of the deaths that have occurred in DuPage County recently are almost all, or the vast majority is, among unvaccinated people. The health department encourages everyone to be vaccinated. I will echo that statement. I can't say it enough. The more people that we get vaccinated, the less hosts there are, the less opportunities are for the virus to spread and keep mutating, and it helps protect all of our kids and our elderly and the people that can't get vaccinated for medical reasons. Sorry, my glasses are steaming up now. If you need more information about vaccine safety or locations where you can get vaccines, go to the DuPage County Health Department website, or you can go to the Illinois Department of Public Health website or the CDC website. But the locations for specific around DuPage County are on the DuPage County Health Department website. I made that comment. Let me skip ahead here. It's very important, again, to get vaccinated, protect our friends, family, coworkers, neighbors, and get the economy back restarted so we can be out freely or in places that we want to go to. Secondly, face coverings. As you're probably aware, Governor Pritzker issued Executive Order number 87 on August 26, 2021. The city staff, the elected officials are following that policy. We changed all of our signs at City Hall. It is somewhat more vague than some of the past executive orders and some of the rulings. It simply states primarily that indoors, everyone shall wear masks in public places. There's a couple of exemptions. It does allow temporary removal of face masks if people are eating, such as restaurants or in a break room or such, and so forth. Also, if there's a workspace or in an office where 6 feet of separation can be maintained. I guess there was some confusion from last week's meeting when the mayor and I weren't wearing masks. So we've changed the policy in consultation to continue to wear masks throughout the meetings for all the public. Even though I just want to assure everybody we are separated by at least 8 feet at the dais. There's only 4 people seated here at a place that could hold 12 or 14 people. We'll echo the encouragement that everybody should be wearing masks when indoors in public places in Illinois. It's a safety precaution, and it's what our current rules are in the state. Again, please get vaccinated so we can beat this virus and get back to normal. And then we can all stop wearing face masks. Thank you.
Are there any other staff members that would have anything to say this evening, this time?
I don't see anyone with their hands up.
Okay. Then we'll begin the business of the meeting. And tonight's first agenda item is considerations of homes for a changing region, Warrenville Housing Action Plan, and Community and Economic Development Director Ron Menser will introduce this agenda item. Ron?
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, City Council. I think most everybody, probably everybody on the meeting tonight would agree that one of the strengths of Warrenville is the quality of its housing stock. Over the past 5 years, the city has adopted a variety of important policy documents and approved a number of fairly significant new residential developments that reflect the city's commitment to the continued diversification of the community's housing stock. In total, these projects include more than 1,200 new housing units. The fact is, however, that the majority of the new housings, with the exception of the age-restricted housing at the corner of Batavia and Butterfield Road, the Warrenville Horizon project, almost all are exclusively what I think most would describe as either luxury or relatively expensive. This has caused some staff and elected officials, appointed officials, to question what type of gaps still might exist between the types of housing that's available in the community and the evolving demographic profile of the community. last fall in an effort to help ensure that the city continues to have a balanced mix of housing that effectively serves the future needs of the community. The City Council authorized staff and a specifically created advisory group of elected and appointed officials, community leaders, and stakeholders that are involved in housing issues in the community to work with representatives of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, MMC, and the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, CMAP, to analyze Warrenville's existing demographics and its housing stock and identify specific actions that can be taken by the city to help ensure that we're dealing with any identified housing issues in the community. And moving forward, we'll provide a very diverse housing stock that meets the needs of the evolving needs of the community. The August 31st, 2021 Housing Action Plan that's included in the agenda packet backup materials for tonight's meeting is the culmination of that planning effort. Tonight we have Kyle Smith from CMAP. He was the project manager, along with several other people that worked closely with Kyle and the team of people from Warrenville to conduct this study. They're going to present their findings and recommendations from the study, kind of a summary of them. From the staff perspective, we're recommending that the City Council's Community Development Committee recommends the City Council endorse the findings contained in the action plan and authorize staff to pursue opportunities to implement the recommendations that are contained in that action plan in the context of existing and future Community Development Department work plan priorities. I'd like to just conclude my comments by extending my appreciation from a staff perspective and on behalf of the city to the team from CMAP and the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, the dedicated professionals. It was somewhat challenging during COVID to get this study done in a timely fashion. Most every communication was done remotely. Our meetings were virtual meetings. But I think the work product that came out of the process is a quality work product, and I think it has value for the city of Warrenville. So thank you very much for your efforts, Kyle, Nancy, and Riggy. And with that, I would turn it over to Kyle. He has a PowerPoint presentation to summarize the findings and recommendations contained in the study.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us tonight. It is a pleasure to speak with you again, and a pleasure to have worked with your community over the last several months. My name is Kyle Smith. I'm with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and I'm here with my colleagues, Nancy Furfer of MMC and Enrique Castillo of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. We have a short PowerPoint to show you, but we wanted to also do a quick round of introductions of ourselves. I think starting with Nancy, who's been with our project for a long, long time. And I believe it looks like you're on mute, Nancy.
Thank you. Hi. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much. And I want to echo Kyle's comments about what a pleasure it was to work with all of you there in Warrenville. Unfortunately, having to do it virtually wasn't quite as nice as it would have been if we had been there in person. But someday after COVID's over, hopefully we will get out to visit. Again, I'm Nancy Furfer. I am a senior advisor with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and I have been working on Homes for Changing Regions since its inception. As the former mayor of Glenview, Illinois, by the way, I was the mayor along with Mayor Lund from your community way back when. And I was the mayor there when they decided to close the Glenview Naval Air Station, and I oversaw its blooming into the Glen, which some of you I hope have heard or seen. But what's interesting about it, at that time, it was about the same time that you were all working on Conterra. And I remember Mayor Lund and I would have many conversations about the challenges of these huge developments. But it's great to see how well Conterra has turned out and continues to grow. With that, though, let me just tell you a little bit about how I got involved with Homes for Changing Region. After having retired from being the mayor of Glenview, I was very, very interested in housing, and I learned a lot from doing the Glenview up until that time was about 95%, give or take some percentage points, all single family residences. And what we realized as we were doing the Glen, it was an opportunity to diversify our housing stock, which we really needed to do. And so with that, the Glen became actually more than 50% of the Glen, which is about 1,000 acres, is some type of multifamily housing of many different types. And it's really enriched our community a lot. It's allowed a diverse type of housing. You can now have any kind of housing you need, you know, whether you're single, raising a family, aging in place, or aging in the community. So that was kind of the beginnings of my involvement with Homes for Changing Region, having begun that way back in, let's see, we started in 2006. And since that time, we have worked in about almost 60 communities throughout the Chicago metropolitan region. It's gone through several iterations. It started more as a long-term, what will your community look like in 20 years? But we're realizing that times change. We've been through 2 housing kind of issues, recessions. The last one is right now. We realized we needed something that was more today. What are the issues? What are you dealing with today? What are some of the things you can be doing today? And into the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Enrique Castillo from CMAP, who will take you through, show you the process we went through, and then we will give you our recommendations, which hopefully will be beneficial to your community. So thank you again for letting us work in your community. We've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Nancy. And it looks like someone has keyed up our PowerPoint. Who is that person?
That actually would be me, Enrique.
Perfect.
I believe if I have any technical difficulties moving the slides, I apologize in advance. I'm unfamiliar with doing this in GoToMeeting.
No worries. Well, thank you everyone for having us tonight. I echo everything Kyle and Nancy has been saying so far. It has been a pleasure, and it has been quite the ride. You know, we started this project before COVID, and we had to slow down because of COVID, and then recalibrate our approach to how we were going to be working with the different communities with Homes for a Changing Region. But as everyone knows, I'm Enrique. I have been introduced as one of the CMAP staffs. I've been with CMAP for about 4 years now, and I'm an associate planner, and I particularly work with housing projects and initiatives within CMAP, and joined the Homes for a Changing Region team about 3 years ago now, and have been with the team now working on this iteration of homes, which we actually just closed out. You all were our final community out of the 10 selected that we worked on through this, what we're calling the second iteration of Homes for a Changing Region. So next slide, please. As Nancy mentioned, this has been a collaborative for the past quite a few, sometimes since 2006, and we've come a long ways. It initially started with the Metropolitan Planning Council, CMAP, and then the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. And then recently added the Illinois Affordable Housing Development Authority, who has provided funding through the Illinois Affordable Housing Trust Fund to do this work and work with communities in addressing their housing issues. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the actual process throughout this iteration of Homes for a Changing Region. So the first thing that we did was actually do a full-blown housing market data analysis to inform the discussion and what we saw the key findings. And we worked with the village and the working group to present these findings, and presented them and had a dialogue to make sure that what the data pulled out was matching up to what the village or the city there in Warrenville was seeing as well. So we wanted to make sure that not only did we bring data, but we also brought the conversation from what the experts, who are you all, everyone that lives within the community, is seeing with their housing issues and moving those forward. So from that conversation, the team got together and we put together a group of expert panelists. This expert panelist was a group of folks that were in neighboring communities or just experts that have seen similar trends like you all were experiencing in Warrenville. And so we brought them to the table to have a conversation with the working group about the key findings that we found. Based on those conversations, and it was a very well-rounded conversation, and we really dove into some really good topics, which we'll talk about here in a second. But from that conversation, we then put together the action plan. The action plan is an outline detailing a set of policy recommendations to help you all move to the next steps, and also addressing the key findings that we saw and had that conversation with that expert panel. So that's how we got to where we are right now, presenting the final action plan and the key recommendations. Next slide, please. So I want to set the stage, and in the report you will see a more detailed analysis and narrative on the key findings, but these were the 4 key trends that we saw, right? We saw that Warrenville's residents are aging in place. 5 out of 10 homeowners are above the age of 55. We also know that Warrenville has recently permitted new rental housing that will add roughly 950 new rental units. As I heard tonight, it looks like one of them just opened and you all had a tour. And we also saw that 3 out of 10 households struggle with housing costs higher than 30% of their income. And then last, we also we saw that Warrenville has neighborhoods with moderately priced homes, but they need investment. Some of these homes need some TLC. So those are the key findings that we saw, and these are the ones that we're highlighting so that we can set the stage for the conversation and the recommendations that we're about to present. In the actual report, you'll see that we go into detail with a lot more of the data that we pulled. So tonight, setting that stage based on those key findings, who wants to live in Warrenville? We know that affluent lifestyle clusters, these are household trends that either own or rent and include older, more settled owners aging in place, as well as younger strives with lower income who will be working in nearby professional jobs and living in campus like Cantera. We also know the missing markets. These households categorized in market segments like the Bohemian Group and the striving singles trends to rent, more frequently work in critical and knowledgeable jobs, and are more likely to live in smaller multi-family homes, the missing middle housing types. And this is where I'm actually going to turn over to Kyle to talk a little bit more about what that missing middle means and how that pertains to Warrenville as well.
Sure. Thank you, Enrique. I just want to add that this part of our analysis was actually provided by Land Use USA, which participated in the expert panel part of the process. And one of the questions that Land Use USA posed is whether the city had all of the housing types for these different types of households that might be attracted to nearby employment. So Enrique mentioned something called the missing middle, and we wanted to pull up this slide for a couple of reasons. The first is that part of the, I'm sorry about that. Part of the Land Use USA analysis suggested that some of these housing types may not be as abundant in the city of Warrenville, but also because the city has done an excellent job in adding a lot of new development in recent years. on this chart, you'll see a couple of different kinds of developments. Single-family homes, like our traditional neighborhood development on the left. Large multifamily development, like the Cantera campus apartment buildings on the right. And then there's a lot of stuff that's in between, especially if you get to the left on things like duplexes and fourplexes that are very much more in character with a conventional residential neighborhood. This set of buildings is considered the missing middle, and the analysis that our expert panel conducted suggested that there might be households, particularly in these smaller buildings to the left, that would be attracted to these buildings if they were here in Warrenville. So our recommendations had two components. First, we recommended a few steps to explore the extent to which the market here in Warrenville could absorb additional housing units, given the very large number of units that have come online or have been permitted in recent years. And we also developed a recommendation to rehabilitate aging subdivisions, which provide moderately priced homes, which are in pretty high demand in today's environment when interest rates are low and the supply of moderately priced houses is not what it used to be. So I want to talk about this first recommendation, which is to explore rental options for the missing middle and senior housing here in Warrenville. We've worked in a lot of communities, and I have to say the city is unusual in the number of rental units, particularly high-end rental units, that has permitted over the last 5 years. Often when we work in communities, we've seen an imbalance between different types of housing that I think is different than what we see in Warrenville, and that your balance is changing right before your eyes. And as we hear from the mayor and perhaps Ron's comments also, the fact that your new buildings are at occupancy suggests that there's a pretty high demand for more. The question is really how much more, and what is that type of housing? When we worked with your working group, and we also learned from your working group guiding the process, that there were really some questions, how much is too much, how much until the market can't absorb anymore, and that developers are continuing, investors are continuing to propose projects with their own market study, which may not necessarily consider some of the investment that's already coming online in the city. So for that reason, we really like to recommend that the city consider hiring a market analyst to give an independent assessment of the state of multifamily development in the city. We think that our data workup could suggest the market for additional senior or missing middle options. But we really think that a market analyst could help the city understand what is still feasible and help the city sort through different investment proposals with their own market studies as they come through the city. At our expert panel, we also talked about local building and zoning regulations. And the discussion really centered on whether they may unintentionally restrict some types of housing, particularly that housing near the single-family home character in the city. And so we recommend evaluating those to determine whether that is the case and whether it is a barrier to adding any additional housing types found in the market analysis. And then finally, articulating a vision, perhaps starting with this action plan, to express a consistent vision to residents and especially developers, what form of housing you'd like to see here in the city. We made a second recommendation on aging subdivisions. We did hear from the working group in our work with them that there are a number of homes that are moderately priced and quite attractive for the jobs in the area, but some of them are within subdivisions where there are multiple properties within need of rehabilitation, or that is the case of individual properties as well. I want to just touch briefly on two programs that could be invested here in the city of Warrenville and are not. Both of them are managed by the Illinois Housing Development Authority. The first on the left, the Single Family Rehabilitation Program, is released about once a year, and through nonprofits or units of government can provide residents earning a moderate income to improve their home. And there's also another state program on home accessibility, which may help those aging homeowners here in the community up to a somewhat more constrained income level with disability improvements for their home. These programs are open to local governments. However, it is very difficult for local governments of the city's size to administer them effectively. And so we recommend that the city seek out a partner. We recently worked with the city of Naperville on its own Homes for Changing Region plan and made a similar recommendation to them. A nonprofit entity that serves as an intermediary in your neck of the woods could more readily apply for and administer these funds. So those are very quick slides from us. We do have a much more extensive action plan. However, we wanted to keep the recommendations and analysis short and be here to answer questions, comments, your feedback, etc.
Well, thank you for the report and your expertise. And we will go through, unless Director Menser has anything to add at this time, we'll go through questions and comments from the alderman.
I don't have anything else to add at this point.
Okay, we'll begin with Alderman Anderson. Do you have questions or comments, Jay?
I guess I don't have a question right now, just a couple observations. You know, I think that it's an interesting set of findings. I think it's fairly provocative to get us to really think about that missing middle concept. I think that's interesting to think about. I guess I don't love the recommendations of when we do an analysis to recommend that we hire more consultants to do more analysis. I know that's not really the intent, but you're trying to push us to look deeper into key topics. The first one, though, it feels like we have a lot of expertise internally, but I would defer that to Ron. He'll help us understand where we need additional resources or not. But I think just a lot of thought-provoking comments in there, and want to take the time to analyze and understand it.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour.
Thanks for all your efforts. The interesting thing is that the way you presented it, the missing middle chart for our community certainly would look much different than what was presented. Our missing middle, obviously, based on your comments, is far smaller than the illustration shows. And I appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you. Alderman Berry.
Thank you. I was thinking the same thing that Alderman Ashour was thinking about the missing middle. It seems like we do have quite a few of these different groups, townhouses, condominiums, duplexes, things like that. And we do have quite a bit of that in Warrenville. I don't know how this section got to be so large. As I sat here and listened to your analysis, I was kind of shocked that this missing middle is so large. I think I just need to read this a little bit better. I think with the explanations that I've received this evening, I really need to go through this one more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Davalos.
Yeah, thank you. I was the consultant or the liaison from council to this team, to this committee, this work. And I will say it was fascinating. And there are resources in this report, which I do encourage you all to maybe read again and to think about, that I was not aware of. There were people from West Dundee, which is a little bit similar to us in some ways, and they walked through their process, and it was very interesting on all kinds of things, including something that wasn't mentioned tonight, but sometimes, what we need is affordable apartments, affordable housing, or in the middle housing that we just lack. And the West Dundee people talked about how they did that and how they got pushback from the community that we don't want affordable housing. We kind of went through this with what we've been doing the last 5 years. So that was fascinating. I may be wrong, but I think that the picture in the report, when they have the single family and they have the multifamily, the part in the middle is just to show all the examples. It's not like that's a percentage of that big part. It's not like 75% is missing middle. I think they just wanted to get all the examples in there. So anyway, the other thing that I thought about in listening to all of this and going through this is we really, especially missing middle, this was a new concept to me entirely. And some of the comments were about, not big housing, but smaller examples like you saw, oftentimes maybe more frequently in a city center, so maybe somebody wouldn't have a car. Well, one of the unique things about us is we don't exactly have your typical city center with shopping and all kinds of things. We have a great city center with the library and the park district there and the Prairie Path. And so it's a wonderful area, but it's not your typical downtown city center. And so I think that has to be included in this new way that we think about the missing middle. In other words, smaller pieces of land with like they said, duplexes, smaller little courtyard areas, or with 4 apartments, or kind of things you might see in a more urban area. And things that were very, 100 years ago, they were all over the place. So I think we need to think about it. I'm happy that we're going to maybe look into this, but I do think there's some challenges presented. You can't, if you're going to the middle of Warrenville, so you don't need a car to go shopping or get groceries. I guess you can Uber it all the time. You can do that, of course, but it's just, I think we have a unique situation here, but I think there's a lot of creative possibilities. And I think that the suggestions, especially looking at the zoning, that sort of thing, that we don't make it difficult for some of these things to happen. And that's going to just take a more modern thinking, which we seem to have a lot of experience at doing and making changes for the future. So I want to thank this whole group. It was very enlightening to me to be part of this. And I think it's very exciting what could possibly happen. And I am a little not sensitive, but concerned that most of the new development, except the Horizon project, really is a higher end. It is a higher end and a housing that's going to cost more. And we need to think about what we can do creatively that looks wonderful and nice and fits in, that might not take quite as much rent or mortgage payment to do. So thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman.
Yes, thank you for your work on this, and thank you, Alderman Davalos, for your volunteering to be on this committee and your explanation of the work. I would make one comment, I think, at the outset, which is that I do tend to agree with what Alderman Anderson said, that I don't feel like the best use of city resources right now is necessarily going out and hiring more consultants to study the market. You know, we just have gone through a process to build a lot of new housing in Warrenville, and as that's being built and as that's shaking out, you know, that'll tell us an awful lot about what the market looks like, at least for those kinds of units. But I do think that the following recommendation that you have listed on page 11 of your report is very interesting and is maybe a more immediate area that we could work on. You say we should evaluate our local building and zoning regulations and take steps to eliminate or revise outdated or overly restrictive code provisions, and whether codes unintentionally restrict or prevent desirable forms of middle housing from being provided in the city. So I guess my question for the representatives of the committee who are here now is, you know, are there examples that you can give us that would help us to get started with that analysis? Are there things you've seen in our code that you think are areas of concern that we should perhaps consider making changes to be more in line with surrounding communities, or to be more in line with the needs of our residents and possible future residents?
Well, let me just start by saying we didn't really do an analysis of your codes, but knowing what the general codes are in most communities, there are things that can be addressed. And if you look at the type of housing you might be interested in, then you have to see whether or not your codes would even accommodate it. I know that in Glenview, we have some housing that's got, and it was designed for more for the empty nesters, where it was more of the, I don't want to call it zero lot line, but around that concept where you had more common open space and less personal yards, but that's a little different than most codes allow. That's just one type of example. So if you look at the kind of housing you might want or desire or that's different, and there are some really interesting projects all around the region, then you have to look at your own codes and say, do they allow it? Another thing you might also consider looking at is even some of the materials that are allowed or not allowed in your building codes. That also can affect the price, but maybe not the quality. And it just depends. So those are the types of things, but we did not do a deep dive into your codes. We just know that this is something that is typical in a lot of communities around the region.
One thing I'd like to add as well is the expert that we brought in to talk a little bit more about codes was Dominic, who is a CMAP staff who has lots of years of experience in working in zoning and local land use at the municipal level. And just the conversation that was held between Dominic and West Dundee. We brought two representatives from West Dundee. We brought Trustee Price and then the Economic Development Director from West Dundee, who they were actually part of the first iteration of Homes for a Change in Region, and really talked about setting up, you know, getting ahead of the game and making sure that you look at your zoning and what that looks like in order to prepare it, and that way you can then bring in the developers. Once the developers come in, everything's already packaged and it's desirable for them to come in and think about developing more of what it is that you need, so that, you know, it's not they come and you got to analyze the zoning and then you got to see if there's any changes, and then that might delay and they might lose interest. So it was a conversation about setting yourself up for the future, so that that's all already, that conversation's already been held and prepared as well.
If I could just make one more comment on the building side. We did not, as the others mentioned, we did not go into this level of detail during our process. So this is a new observation, but there have been communities with their building codes that have undergone reforms in the last couple of years to understand what technologies may be emerging, and whether those are things that developers might use in an investment. Compressed wood products is one of these to allow new and innovative types of buildings and at a more affordable price. One of your neighbors in DuPage County, the village of Lombard, went through this on the building side, and they were able to do it in-house with an interdepartmental process that included a few investors that had recently completed buildings in the community. And that's on the building code side, because of course building and zoning are different. But that is an example of a process to identify specific restrictions with with investors, and with the intent of encouraging, I shouldn't say encouraging, preventing the unintentional restriction, of valuable investments in the community.
Okay, thank you. My only other question would be to ask for just a little bit more information about your 2 suggestions for grants and programs that people could apply for to rehabilitate our aging subdivisions. Can someone speak a little bit more about how we would get started with something like that? I mean, what specific next steps do you envision? It's not obvious to me how one goes about starting a local nonprofit to do something like that, or even to partner with Naperville to start such a nonprofit.
I will start with this, and I will let the rest of the team comment if they wish. Our observation is that there is money that could be invested here in Warrenville that is effectively that could help your seniors age in place and help rehabilitate some of your older homes in need of TLC. But it's being left on the table because there's no intermediary, and you're not alone. This is true in many corners of our region. And when we spoke with the city of Naperville a couple of years ago, we made a similar recommendation to them. We recommended at that time that the city and DuPage County, which has its own resources, work together to identify a stronger intermediary in your area. I think we would recommend, at a minimum, that the city of Warrenville reach out to the city of Naperville. We've let the staff liaison who worked on this in Naperville know we've made this recommendation in this plan, and a next step beyond that would possibly be having staff in your city and that city meet with the county to talk about how a intermediary could get started. The reason we invoke both of those entities, particularly the county, is that they receive their own federal resources, and these tend to be things that are also used for home rehabilitation, and could be the beginning fundings of such an entity. But we absolutely acknowledge that there's a gap here, and that is leading to available state funds being spent in other communities that could meet the needs here in Warrenville too.
All right, thank you.
Is that all, Alderman Goodman? Any other questions?
I'm sorry, was Mr. Castillo about to chime in?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, one of the benefits of bringing IDA as a partner is to be able to offer some of these resources. As Kyle said, there is a gap in applying for these resources, or just, knowing about them and bringing them to their community, that's a quick, an introduction. We can set that up. We work very closely with Ida, and all it takes is for you to say, hey, can you set up a meeting for us so we can meet that person that is running the single family rehab program or the home accessibility program. And then, that's a conversation that then can be held between the two.
I would add one more thing, Enrique. I'm sorry to keep going on, but I think we would extend that also for the idea with meeting with DuPage County, and that is something, an idea that we suggested to the city of Naperville as well. So we're happy to help. We see these gaps throughout the region and happy to facilitate those kinds of conversations in these kinds of cases.
Okay, well then all I have to say is that I hope staff or some group, including elected officials, can follow up on that.
Thank you. Alderman Krischel. Alderman Krischel, do you have any comments? We're not getting audio.
I do. So,
there you go.
Yep, sorry, I was on mute. No questions, comments. Obviously there was a lot of work put into this, so I definitely appreciate that. There's tons of analysis that was done, and that's pretty clear and obvious. So thanks to everyone who was a part of this. I have nothing else that hasn't already been said, so thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
Oh, I thank you for all the work that went into this study and everything else. I'm looking at it and listening to all the things. Not all of those occasions occur to, I don't think, Warrenville. We're a little unique in the area of DuPage County, but I do appreciate the offering up of some of the things that we should look at. And I thought we're doing a pretty good job here now. Obviously, we could always do improvements. So thank you for everything that you've given us an opportunity to look at. And as long as we can have that information in the background to look at and fit it into our existing and future community development work plans, and I think that's our priority. So thank you for giving us this information, and we need now to look at it and see how much of it needs work to be done by us now and move forward. Thank you again.
Thank you. And before I turn it over to Mayor Brummel for his thoughts and questions, I just wanted to ask, I heard a term that I hadn't heard before. It was called knowledge jobs as being in the missing middle. Could you tell me what a knowledge job would be?
Excellent question. I'll go for our team here. I think we would define a knowledge job in kind of an abstract sense of those jobs involved in the creation of ideas and processes, etc. I think, practically speaking, we could think of them as being in professional services of fire and insurance and real estate kinds of professions. Office jobs might be a more succinct way of saying it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, yeah, it's people who actually, their jobs are created really through their minds. Even if they're doctors, they could be architects, they could be, it's people that, so it's not anybody who's doing more physical type work.
I thought the reference in the report was that they were recipients of lower wages than others. Was that the reference that was in your report, or are they eligible for a broad range of salaries and wouldn't be requiring houses necessarily in the missing middle?
I think a good way to think about it is there's a range of salary types, and there's a range of professionals at various stages in their career. One class of professionals that might be worth thinking about is those who are earlier in their career, the rising professionals. They're more likely to rent. They might be a little more mobile. They're you're looking for a unit in an attainable range. And I actually have to confess, 10 years ago, I was one of them, and I ended up buying a house in the same community where I live now and raising 2 kids. So I never thought when I rented there that I would end up staying there 10 years later and having my kids in the school system. So I think when we think of some of these workers, we're really thinking of folks who are maybe in their late 20s, maybe early 20s, early 30s, who are not looking to settle down, but very well may end up settling in your community if they can find a place here. And there's a lot of them out there.
Thank you for that explanation. Found the report very thorough, and the investigation of our city was done very professionally, and I appreciate that. I think there would be a lot of interest in the investment and rehabilitation of our moderately priced home. And it would be interesting to find a working model of that, or identify specific funding for that in order to, possibly move forward with that initiative. I think that would be of great interest, at least as from my seat. And with that, I will turn it over to Mayor Brummel. Mayor, comments?
Thank you, Alderman. Just for a moment, dwelling on what Kyle just said, when I was at the grand opening of Everton and meeting folks that had just moved to Warrenville. Interestingly enough, a young couple came up with a little girl and they introduced themselves and expressed their enthusiasm for being in Warrenville. While they loved the development, they said they were already scouting the community for a place to build a home. And it's like, yeah, well, we've been saying this all along. We bring these folks to the community, and if they like what they see, they're going to want to invest in the community and stay there. So it brought a big smile to my face to have that conversation with them, because of course that's one of our objectives, is to have new people come to the community that we want here and have them stay for a long time and raise their family. So it was interesting that you mentioned that, Kyle, because I lived it a couple days ago. It was a lot of fun. I too would thank everyone who had a part in this, especially Director Menser, who never fails to look at things the way they are and try to find ways for us to do things better. And I really, the findings of this were fascinating reading. It reflects pretty much what I see in the community and what I have seen in the community. The gaps and the deficits and the opportunities that are enumerated in this report are things that I see that make sense to me, the things that we should work on. They're also difficult things to accomplish. One of the problems, I suppose, with moderate to low price housing is that it's hard to borrow money to build those types of things. That's not what's hot now. What's hot now is what's being built. And if you look in any community, Warrenville is no exception. If you go through the decades, you can see what was hot every decade, and that's that neighborhood or that subdivision. So sometimes our wish to have that moderate and low price housing runs into the brick wall of who's going to finance it, who's going to build it. So we have to cross that barrier at some point. That's very difficult. But certainly the findings I found to be accurate. The recommendations for opportunities made sense. I would just remind the council that tonight we're not embarking on some program where we're going to hire people and move ahead and make all kinds of decisions. We're only being asked to endorse the findings and to empower Ron to follow up as he is able to, as Alderman Wilson said, within the context of his work plan as already defined by the council. And I think this is, again, an opportunity to start slowly and work in the direction that we need to try to fill these gaps. So I very much appreciate that. And of course, resources are tight. So that's why I just want to emphasize that we're not embarking on some huge program tonight. We're empowering staff to watch for opportunities to move ahead, to fill those gaps and to make those opportunities a reality. So again, thanks for everyone. It was a great report, and I'm sure we'll be able to use it, which is, of course, our fondest wish for every report we get. It's not always the case, but this one seems particularly useful. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And Ron, I just want to say, if you have any questions, any follow-up that you would like for us to help with, we are more than happy to help.
Director Menser, go ahead.
Thank you. I just a couple maybe concluding thoughts that I want to share with the City Council. First, I was remiss at the onset of this discussion in my initial comments to recognize the effort that Senior Planner Natalia Domavasova, she recently resigned from a full-time position, is working for the city in a part-time capacity at this point in time, but she has been the one constant from city staff to work closely with the homes team and the special work group that was created to help facilitate the process. It was challenging at times, very challenging at times, because of all the virtual and remote nature of discussions, and especially when you have a lot of data heavy discussions, those sometimes can be very challenging to do remotely. But Natalia did a really good job, and the report is what it is because of a lot of the effort that she invested into it on behalf of the city of Warrenville. And I do truly appreciate that and wanted to recognize that. I did also want to just quickly provide some perspective, at least from my professional point of view, on missing middle in Warrenville. In my mind, missing middle, there's like three main characteristics, I think, that define what missing middle is. That's the form of the development. And the form of missing middle development is development that fits into the context of the kind of the core areas of the community where it's more walkable. It's not large scale developments like you see out in Cantera, or even large subdivisions where you have huge blocks of townhouses going on and on and on, or 100 townhouses. It's more so infill development on small lots that the structures have a feel and are of a size that are more similar in nature to the existing residential structures that are nearby. Although they may not be a 3,000 square foot single family home, it might be a 3,000 square foot triplex, but it still has the form and scale of a residential house. The location is the second characteristic, and that's generally, Kyle was talking about kind of in the central city, down, near the central core of the community. And I agree with Alderman Davalos that, Warrenville's not, typical in that nature. We do have some older core areas of the community, but I think existing or missing middle is housing that is located close to what I'll call community amenities. Those could be retail amenities, those could be public facilities, those could be trail networks, or a combination thereof. And I think we have plenty of spaces in the community that are very close to those types of groups of amenities, and trying to find out opportunities to put in smaller scale multifamily at a more affordable and attainable price would be what missing middle is trying to accomplish. And then from a price standpoint, it's not truly affordable. Missing middle is not truly affordable housing. Affordable housing defined is generally housing that meets the needs of households and is affordable to households that are making 60% or less of annual median income in the community. Missing middle housing generally targets anything above 60. Most of the time, when it gets built, if it gets built, it's between 80 and 100% of the area median family income. And a better way to describe that is it's attainable. It's attainable to some of the young professionals that Kyle talked about, young teachers, singles that have a good job, but they can't, if they want to live by themselves, they can't necessarily afford effectively living in a one-bedroom apartment at Everton Flats and paying $1,750 a month in rent. So that's really what we're trying to describe in missing middle. And I thought it would be hopefully helpful to provide a little more context of how that relates to the city of Warrenville. And I personally or professionally believe there's opportunities for that. I also believe strongly that the city zoning ordinance is somewhat antiquated and clearly does not allow for that type of housing to be built in our community. Almost every housing project that does get built that has any type of multiple unit component to it has to go through a planned unit development process. And as part of that process, they have to request relief from a long list of city requirements that are somewhat antiquated in certain cases. And the problem is that a big developer that's going to build a 40 or $50 million project can distribute the cost and energy and investment that's necessary to go through that type of complex entitlement process over a big investment. Whereas somebody that might be looking at building a small infill missing middle type development, they have to get the same approvals. And under the city's current codes, they would have to go through the same type of process. And it just doesn't economically make sense for them to invest the time, energy, and money in an unknown process. So I think that's where based on the conversations we've had with the work group, that's where it makes sense for the city to kind of take a closer look or do a more forensic analysis of our zoning ordinance to see where there might be opportunities to eliminate some of the requirements or adjust them so that it makes it more possible for the smaller scale of multi-unit project to happen in the infill areas of our community.
Okay, thank you. Within the context of this agenda item, there's a committee action that's requested. Alderman Goodman, would you like to move that forward?
I would. One comment first on knowledge workers. When we were first hearing some objections from the community to approving new rental housing in Warrenville, some of the language that was used in objecting to rental properties had to do with the fact that they felt everyone in rental properties were transient. I spoke out very loudly at that time that some of my very best friends and my husband were all renters when I met them, or when we graduated from law school and college and their master's programs in education to become teachers with huge student loans. They were renters and they needed affordable places to live. And those are really wonderful people to bring into the community. My husband, with his PhD in physics and a job at Fermilab, was not able to afford a single family home in Warrenville when he moved to this area. And those are, I think, the knowledge workers that you're talking about and that we need to find better spaces for here in Warrenville. He lived in Naperville. Luckily, he has now upgraded to Warrenville. So things have improved quite a bit since I met him 10 years ago. But I will make a motion to recommend the City Council, 1, endorse the findings contained in the August 31st, 2021 Warrenville Housing Action Plan prepared by the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus and the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning Council. And 2, authorize staff to pursue opportunities to implement its recommendations within the context of existing and future Community Development Department work plan priorities.
Alderman Davalos, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Deputy Clerk Gravetti, would you please read the roll call for the vote?
Alderman Goodman,
Aye.
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Weidner,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Krischel,
Aye.
Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Ashour,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you once again for your excellent report and for your presentation. It was great hearing from you all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. It was an honor to work with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Menser. The next item on this evening's agenda is consideration of the Warrenville Park District lease extension for Harding Field. And excuse me, management analyst Kristen Youngmeyer will introduce this agenda item. Welcome, Ms. Youngmeyer.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. So Harding Field is located just south of the Public Works Building. And as summarized in your packet, in 2000, the city entered into an agreement with the Park District where it allowed the district to release and use a portion of this city property for park uses. The proposed revised agreement included in the backup materials would extend the lease to the district until 2027. The executive director, Tim Reinbolt, who was unfortunately wasn't able to join us tonight, did say that the district is all set in moving forward with the revised lease should it be approved. And it is the intent that staff will be working to eventually transfer this property to the Park District before the revised lease expires. This goes in keeping with the ongoing direction from council to divest the city of park space in accordance with the city's original intent when the land was purchased back in 2000. If you guys have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you. Beginning with Alderman Anderson, questions or comments?
No questions or comments.
All right, thank you. Alderman Ashour?
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Barry?
No questions, no comments. Thank you.
Alderman Davalos?
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
Just a note that I've known Dave Harding all my life. I think Harding Field is a wonderful property, and I think that eventually transferring it to the Park District shouldn't be held up by the existence of this lease, and hopefully we'll still be able to do that before this lease expires in about 2042. That gives us plenty of time to get that done. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Krischel?
Nothing from me, thanks.
Alderman Wilson?
No problem, no comments.
Okay. I have nothing to add. Mayor Brummel, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. This is also requested to be an action item. If anyone would like to, Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the City Council approve the amended and restated intergovernmental agreement between the City of Warrenville and the Warrenville Park District regarding the lease of city property for Harding Field.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Deputy Clerk Ravetti, would you please take a roll call on the vote, please?
Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Davalos?
Aye.
Alderman Barry?
Aye.
Alderman Krischel?
Aye.
Alderman Goodman?
Aye.
Alderman Anderson?
Aye.
Alderman Widener?
Aye.
Alderman Ashour?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And we'll move on to an informational update on the Illinois Prairie Path Trailhead project, and Senior Civil Engineer Christine Hocking will introduce this topic. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Chairman Widener. At the July 19th City Council meeting, the Council approved the preferred Illinois Prairie Path Trailhead redesign option. This redesign included moving the Restaurant Pavilion building to the southeast and the Illinois Prairie Path Heritage Display to the northeast area. I'm going to share my screen now so you can see the new revised plans. Further in my presentation, I'll talk about the funding for the project as well as the remaining project schedule. So I believe everyone can see my screen now. Okay, that's great. So this is the result of that July meeting. These are the, I would say, 98% final engineering plans. In this, to give you a little perspective, in the lower left-hand corner is the library. We have City Hall just to the right of it, and we have Stafford Place right here through the middle. The parking area is right here in the center of your screen. We have the Illinois Prairie Path right here along the kind of northern upper edge of the page as well. And so this is the Trailhead project limits. Prior, our pavilion building was in this area, in this corner over here on the left side of the page. However, the area along here all the way across is the ComEd overhead transmission line easement. There are, as everyone knows, a main ComEd structure right along the Prairie Path and 2 sets of overhead wires on each side of that ComEd structure. There is an easement located on that area, and because of that, we had to move our pavilion building after obtaining comments from them in late spring of this year. So the new location, as we explained in the July meeting, is adjacent to the parking lot area. We have the similar layout of the restroom building facilities. There's 2 restroom facilities and a main little maintenance area in the center. There is a pavilion around the structure with the overhang that includes space for 2 tables. And around it, as you can see, there's an intricate sidewalk. I believe it's about 8 feet wide in the narrow sections, kind of connecting everything from the crosswalk by the City Hall along the parking lot area, takes you down to the Prairie Path, takes you across the parking lot, and can connect you over to the gazebo, which doesn't exist right now. So it's a very intricate new path sidewalk system that kind of connects all the existing areas of the Civic Center area. If you go to the right of the page, you'll see the new location of the heritage display. It used to be closer to the ComEd structure. Again, ComEd did not allow things within structures, seatings within about 50 feet of the structure area, so we had to move that as well. It actually is going to be located in the area where right now there is a informational kiosk. There's a couple benches, a little concrete area to sit on. All those items will be removed and will be replaced with the heritage display. Just for everyone's information and memory, this is kind of what the heritage display is going to look like. Obviously, it's in a different location, but there's seating on both sides, memorial paver, Illinois Prairie Path logo in the middle, as well as some other visual elements, including sculptural railroad component, which is actually going to be made of now stamped concrete, and a historical kiosk. So all of those amenities that you see there will be placed in this area on the right side of your screen. Also included in what you see here against the heritage display, there will be a drinking fountain that's been relocated that's currently in that area, trash receptacles in that area as well. If we move back towards the restroom pavilion, if you kind of look towards the lower left-hand corner of it, there is going to be a new drinking fountain, bike workstation, and I think we have about 5 bike racks in that location. I'm going to go now to, I think that's all of the site amenities that is shown on this page. What's kind of shown in here as well as a shaded area, that's all of the landscaping. So I'm going to kind of move to the next screen. I'll wait till it refreshes. And so all of the landscaping that you see here is going to be very similar to what you see along the monument sign that's at the corner of Butterfield and Batavia. A lot of native grasses, small shrubs, perennial plants intermixed in there and kind of surrounding this little path area. So the idea is you come off of the corner of Batavia and Butterfield and you come down the Prairie Path and you see this, you know, intricate little railroad stamped concrete, and it kind of takes you into this area to this heritage display. There's going to be some signage. So it's going to be, I think, Hitchcock Design Group is working with ERA on, there are consultants for this project. They did a great job at the monument, and this little layout here looks great as well. Everything else that you see to the left on your screen in this little area where a lot of the Park District has a lot of their facility events, as well as the city, it's all going to be a grass seed mix. If you move to the left, everything around the ComEd easement. We have native grasses planted there as well as some normal seed mix, grass seed mix along the sidewalk areas and up to the gazebo. Some additional plantings around the gazebo as well. As you can see on the left side as well, the butterfly garden is going to be relocated to this area in the corner. It's going to get a lot of great sun. There's not a lot of trees in this area, but there's going to be a lot of nice new native plants and perennial plants that will help to attract those butterflies in here. There will also be interpretive signage and just a great little area to have in that location. Other amenities, we are making some ADA upgrades along Stafford Place for the connections across Stafford Place. Some of them right now are not compliant or maybe just not in the right areas. So we're going to fix that as part of this project. The gazebo obviously will become ADA compliant, which was one of our first scope of the project from the very beginning. So when you're coming from the Prairie path, as you're walking towards the gazebo, you will go up in elevation to meet the top, close to the top of the gazebo in this area, or to the top of the gazebo in that area. And then to get back down, you can come around and the ramp will ramp down around to the south side of the gazebo. So that's kind of how that area is going to work out. Over there, there'll be a small retaining wall where this will kind of ramps up because of the existing elevations. So that's kind of an overview of the amenities as part of the Trailhead project, as part of the redesign project scope, and the different areas of native plantings and perennials and where everything's going to be landscaped. And see if I can remember how to stop presenting. Oh, there we go. So because of this redesign, the project costs have decreased in costs. A couple of areas that we had to remove because of the ComEd comments included reducing the size of that pavilion overhang. That obviously is a large amount of the cost savings that we have. We had to remove some smaller items like the rain gardens within the easement, and we took away some of the colored concrete. It just didn't make sense in the way the new layout was. So because of that, the construction costs decreased about 150,000 or 100. I guess there's a misprint in here, but it's about $170,000, going from about $950,000 to just under 800. The cost estimate for engineering construction inspection obviously also went down because the cost of the construction has gone down and there's less amount of days for construction. And then on top of that, during this whole process, when the project was $950,000, we knew that we only had a very small percentage of surface transportation funding. It was about $378,000. And we knew that there could be a potential to get additional STP funding. We didn't know how much, and at the time there wasn't any available, but we put our name in the hat and we were #1 just in case some funding came up. We actually just learned about a week and a half ago that additional surface transportation funding is now available. And because we had put in our name, I guess, in the hat early on, we are the first ones to be asked if we do need that money. And obviously we do for this project to help decrease the local construction costs and bring up those percentages back up to a 75 grant funding and 25 local funding cost share. As a comparison, beforehand it was reversed. There was about 25 grant funding and about 75 local shares. So that's really good news. So between both of these items, the decreased costs in construction, increase in surface transportation funding, the local share went from $630,000 to about $222,000. So that's a pretty significant cost decrease for the city, which I think is a great thing. I had presented the construction agreement with IDOT and the construction engineering agreement previously in February. And so because of all the things that have happened since then, we're gonna have to update those agreements. And I will be presenting those at a future city council meeting once we know the IDOT letting date. I don't wanna do it too soon, but we do need to get those in place before the IDOT letting date is set. So that will be coming in the future. In terms of the remaining project schedule, we initially had thought that we could be on a January letting schedule, which would allow for construction in the spring. We've had a lot of conversations with ComEd trying to push their review timeline. And so far, it seems that that's going to be unsuccessful in order to meet that January letting date. We do have until April's letting date. Until after the April letting date, the surface transportation funding expires. So that's the latest available date. I think because of ComEd's timeline, review timeline, and because now we have more STP funding, we can now put some of the construction engineering costs into the federal kind of bucket. And when we do that, we have to go through a specific process. It's called qualifications-based selection, which involves putting a newspaper notice out, getting proposals from engineering consultants. So we didn't do that before because we didn't have enough money to put towards that. But now that we do, we should go through that process, and that usually takes a month or two. So because of those two reasons, it makes sense to kind of push to the last letting date in April, which would make that a fall construction schedule. And we would anticipate having the contractor start after summer days. So with that, we'll take any questions that anyone has about the project or anything that I've discussed.
Well, first of all, thanks for sharing that great news. You've been the point person most responsible for our success with ComEd, and I'm sure I speak for all the council in expressing our appreciation to your professional attendance and communication to ComEd. It wasn't easy at times, but goes to show you your persistence really paid off by the additional grant funding that you were able to locate, and we all appreciate your efforts. Thank you. Alderman Anderson, do you have questions or comments?
Just curious, Ms. Hawking, do we have any renderings of the new design?
Yes. Of the pavilion building?
Yeah, or just what do we think the look is going to be when it's done?
So our extra consultant costs did not include a new rendering of everything. At the previous meeting, I had shared, let's see if I could do this again. This is the rendering of the single canopy. This was shared at the July meeting. This is the color scheme. This is the look with the two tables underneath. So this is the view essentially kind of from the Prairie path kind of towards the corner of Butterfield and Batavia from that area. So I guess that's the rendering on that side. And then this will be the view from, I guess you're kind of standing more in the parking lot area. And that's what I guess kind of the look will be from the back side. So we have doors on both sides for the restrooms, and then the utility closet door on the other side with some windows, I believe, on the back side. What's not shown in here also is we've added the Warrenville logo to these columns. So the Warrenville logo will be on, I believe, on the side here and the side here on this. We thought that kind of tied in everything from the monument, the streetscape project with the monument and the columns and our new logos and everything. We thought that's a nice little touch in there. But in terms of rendering of the overall area, no, I do not have one of those.
That's fine. This was helpful and nice work. I'm hopeful. You did a really nice job motivating ComEd to come back to the table and respond. It'd be wonderful if we met that spring deadline, if possible. So nice work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour. Alderman Ashour? Okay, he appears to be, we'll come back to him. Alderman Berry?
Yes, I would like to thank Senior Civil Engineer Hocking. This is really great that we were able to take something that we were so disappointed with and turn it into something that is amazing for what what we had to do, or what you had to do, which was change everything pretty much. And it's still going to be an amazing space for people along the Prairie Path to visit, for the citizens of Warrenville to visit when they come through. And I'm so happy that we were able to go through with this, and congratulations on getting that extra funding. You've really done an excellent job with that. It's nice to see that we can save some money somewhere. I appreciate all your hard work and everyone that has been on this committee who has done so much work over the past several years. When we heard that it might not happen because of Commonwealth Edison, we were all so crestfallen, because it just was, how could that happen? And really, you've turned lemons into lemonade. It's just great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll go back to Alderman Ashour now. Alderman, we had trouble contacting you before. Take it away.
Thank you for all your efforts in making it more affordable for the taxpayers.
Not a problem.
Thank you. Alderman Davalos?
Yes, I just had to concur with the other comments of the alderman on what an amazing feat that this has been. Just a couple quick questions. So there will be no reduction in the ADA parking, let's say in front of City Hall or in any other parts of that area? Okay,
Correct.
great.
Yep.
And a strange question here. As far as the pavilion, is this hooked to water and sewer, or is this more of a, okay, great. That's great.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
Thank you. Yes, saving us nearly $408,000 of taxpayer money is huge. Yay. But just a minor question. You said the 170,000 was a typo. Did you mean that the reduction is to 780,000, or did you mean that the actual savings was 150,000?
The reduction is to about 780,000.
Okay. And the Summer Days Committee was just asking me at the wrap-up meeting this past week about whether or not this construction would start before or after Summer Days. So it's a relief to be able to answer that question, or at least have some notion that the construction will be starting after Summer Days. So thank you for answering that. My last question has to do with the windows. I was a little surprised to see windows in the design of the building, because based on the reduced size, I thought these were single-seater restrooms. And I guess in a single-seater restroom, often there wouldn't be windows. I mean, maybe in a multi-stall thing where everything's kind of more closed off, you could have windows and not affect privacy concerns. But I'm sure we'll get more details in that rendering later. But are we sure there's going to be windows?
You know, I know this was the rendering. I have to double check the architectural drawings. I think the idea of the windows was to make the view from City Hall a little bit more softer, and not just see a brick wall with doors for that area. So the windows, I don't think would be see-through or anything like that. They would be frosted, or maybe just let a little bit of light in. The size might have changed since this original rendering back in July when the architect has put together architectural plans, but I can follow up with you after the meeting and verify that.
Okay, I don't think we need to know these details this second, but at some point, sure, that'll get clarified. Thank you.
Alderman Krischel? Yeah, you're muted.
This thing doesn't like me. I don't know. I have to get a new headset. No, I was just gonna say, what a relief. $400,000 is a huge chunk of money when we're looking at a project like this. And you know, early on when we saw costs rising, and then some other things that were thrown in here that were outside of our control, and to now have this project kind of where it's at, and this cost savings is a very welcome thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
All I can say is thank you so very, very much for following through on this. It's not everything we wanted from the very beginning, but no one ever should expect to get everything they want. I think you've done a super job on this, and I can't wait to see it come to fruition. So thank you again for all your efforts in following through on this, and thank you.
And over to the mayor, Mayor Brummel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. Christine, strong work. Thank you so much. Your persistence made this happen when it was very, very doubtful. Concerning the entire project in our interaction with Commonwealth Edison, if I would give them a Yelp review, it would be 1 or 0 stars. Thank you.
Thank you. No explanation on the review is necessary. And again, this was an informational report. Unless there's any concluding comments, we can thank Ms. Hocking once again for all her hard work and her effort, and move on to the next agenda item. So thank you, Ms. Hocking. Next item is the informational update on Old Town Development Site number 2, and Community and Economic Development Director Ron Menser will lead us through this information.
Thank you. I wanted to take the opportunity tonight to give the City Council a quick update on all of the activities that have been occurring as it relates to getting ready to redevelop and reuse the former Citgo property. We commonly refer to it at City Hall as Old Town Redevelopment Site number 2. And I wanted to do this. It's been a few months since we talked about it with the City Council, but I'm regularly asked by members of the community, like, what is happening with that property? Why isn't anything going on? And the reality of it is a lot's going on. You can't really see it, but it's a lot of work that needs to get done so that we can move forward in a intelligent fashion that's efficient and in a cost-efficient manner going forward. So I'm just going to run through all that's happened since the last update, and then open it up for comment or questions. The city did receive the Illinois EPA leaking underground storage tank approval of all of the tank removal work that was performed by the city's contractors early this year. So that's all been signed off by the state. That's important because once it gets signed off, we were able to finalize our payouts with the contractor and then submit all of the documentation necessary to receive reimbursement for most of those costs. So we completed that reimbursement application and submitted it to the state. It only takes them a mere 90 days to review it, so we're still waiting for their review comments and hopefully approval of it. We also have been working closely with the state to define the next stage of site investigation that will occur on the site as it relates to the leaking underground storage tank contamination on the property. So we had to develop a report and a proposed next phase of investigation for their review and approval, which we have received, which means that we can move forward with that work once it's approved by the City Council, and then be confident that once it's completed that the state will also reimburse us for much of those costs. We have negotiated a contract or a proposal task order with the city's environmental consultant to do that next phase of leaking underground storage tank related investigation. That item is the next item on the agenda this evening for your consideration. Concurrently with all the leaking underground storage tank work, we have been working with our attorneys, the state of Illinois attorneys, the state Brownfields Assistance Office, to finalize the intergovernment agreement that will provide the city access to no interest, partially forgivable loan that the city can use to deal with all kinds of contamination and building demolition related issues on the site that are not related to the underground storage tanks. I included in the agenda backup materials the most current version of the agreement, which will, I believe, be the final agreement that will be hopefully including in the next city council agenda packet for city council consideration and hopefully approval. A couple key revisions that have been made since this agreement was shared with the city council back in May include that the cost, or not the cost, but the amount of funding that would be made available to the city under this agreement has increased from $690,000 to $775,000. A small part of that increase is related to some anticipated increased costs that the city would incur to deal with the asbestos remediation work that's going to be required on the property. But the bulk of the additional funding is just was our request to add a 10% contingency into the amount of funding. So it's not allocated to any specific item. Hopefully it won't be necessary, but if for some reason we run into unforeseen conditions, there's some additional buffer in that funding that we would have access to so that we could properly address those issues. Some of the insurance requirement language that contained in the agreement were adjusted. Specifically, the agreement requires pollution liability insurance to be provided. That can be relatively costly. And the agreement was to change so that it's clear that the city wouldn't have to provide that insurance. That would be the environmental remediation contractors that would provide that insurance. They typically, or commonly, I wouldn't say typically, they commonly are used to providing that type of insurance. So they're more adept at acquiring that insurance, probably at a better rate than the city would be able to. And then the agreement now much more clearly acknowledges the fact that a significant amount of the total funding will be dismissed by the loan funding, that is, will be dismissed by the state if the city complies with all the terms of the agreement. The previous language implied that it was still kind of discretionary. I don't think it was intentional, but it did imply that the state had some discretion of whether they were going to dismiss part of those funds, and now it's much more clear that they will dismiss them just as long as we comply with the terms of the agreement. And then there was some additional cure rights and IEPA notification requirements that were incorporated into the agreement just to protect the city's interest and give us an opportunity to cure any non-compliant issues that might occur with the agreement. Those wouldn't occur intentionally, but if for some reason something evolved that we weren't even aware of, the state's now required to notify us and provide us some opportunity to correct those things. So that's the RLF. It's a very exhaustive, long, a lot of fine grain detail of it. But overall, it does afford the city the ability, if it was approved, to access funding that would allow us to get the work done that's necessary to be done, and then pay back the state over a long period of time over the next 10 years at no interest and have up to $200,000 of those funds relieved or dismissed. Again, concurrently with all those other efforts, we have been working forward to develop a preliminary site plan for the property. There's been a special advisory group that has been established to help guide that process. We've met with that group one time in person, had a variety of follow-up email communications. We're going to be meeting with that group again, probably in the next 30 to 45 days to revisit some site planning issues that have surfaced over the last couple months, and hopefully get in a position where the work group will be able to make a recommendation to the city council on what they feel would be a preferred preliminary site redevelopment plan for the property. That would be presented at a committee meeting, maybe the November committee of the whole meeting, community development committee of the whole meeting, so that the city council could consider that and hopefully endorse a site plan, and which will be important for the city for two reasons, because that will be the foundation of the detailed cleanup plans that we develop for the property, and it will also help us begin marketing the property to end users, hopefully some of which will be some high quality private development along the street frontages. As part of the site planning process, we did have our longtime traffic engineer perform an analysis of the operation of the existing Batavia Road, River Road, Warrenville Road intersections, and evaluate whether it would be feasible to introduce a new stop condition on westbound Warrenville Road at Batavia Road. Right now, that's a free flow right-hand turn. And we wanted to understand whether it was safe to stop that condition without creating other ancillary traffic congestion that would be dangerous in the area. And if it was possible to introduce that stop condition, we would be able to introduce some on-street parking along the Batavia Road frontage of the property, similar to the on-street parking that you might see, or that you do see on Batavia Road, kind of on the east side of Batavia Road, back behind the police facility. So that traffic analysis was included in the backup for the agenda packet, just for your review and reference. And then finally, last but not least, we have been working with our environmental consultant and the IAPA to develop a detailed bid package for the demolition and asbestos remediation work that needs to occur on the property. It's our hope that we can still get that demolition package finalized and presented to the city council for review and approval, and we can go out to bid so that hopefully we can still complete the demolition activities yet this calendar year and be able to use the RLF funding that we'll hopefully have in place by then to cover those costs. So with that, I would be available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions and comments, beginning with Alderman Anderson.
No questions. Appreciate the update.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour.
No questions, thanks.
Alderman Berry.
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Davalos.
No questions, but I'm just so excited. Thank you for all your work. This is wonderful. This is wonderful. Thank you.
And Alderman Goodman.
No questions.
Thank you. Alderman Krischel.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right, I got it. No questions, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Wilson.
I have no questions, but I'd like to recommend the city council pass oops, I'm sorry. I don't mean to jump the gun.
Okay. Hold that thought for a while. Mayor Brummel.
Thank you. Just a quick thank you to Ron for your persistence over the long haul, which is what it takes to get this type of a project moving and completed. We've been through this process before, and your persistence and your constant attention to the details have made a lot of these long hauls very successful to the community. And I anticipate this is going to be another one. So thanks so much for sticking with it.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And again, thanks to Director Menser. That's all the information that we had to present on this item. Our next item is consideration of Terracon Consultants Incorporated task order for additional Old Town redevelopment, site number 2, environmental investigation services. The Senior Civil Engineer, Christine Hocking, will introduce this item. Christine?
Thank you. As Ron mentioned in the previous agenda item, this is the environmental consultants contract for the stage 1 environmental site investigation services for the Lost Star leaking underground storage tank program requirements. The consultant Terracon has been working with us on this project in Old Town redevelopment site number 2 since the beginning. They are very familiar, obviously, with the site, and their contract has been reviewed by staff and is reasonable from our perspective. The majority of the work will be reimbursed, as Ron had explained, by the IEPA LUST program. The proposal is included in the backup material items for your review, and the committee action requested would be to recommend passing the resolution, which is also included in the backup information, approving the task order number 3 with Terraconic Consultants.
Sorry, questions and comments, beginning with Alderman Anderson.
No questions.
Alderman Ashour,
No questions.
Alderman Barry,
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Davalos,
No questions, thanks.
Alderman Goodman,
Nothing from me.
Alderman Krischel,
No questions, thank you.
and Alderman Wilson.
No comments.
Okay, Mayor Brummel, anything?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Back to Alderman Wilson, if you want to tell us what's on your mind.
Okay, I don't, thank you. I'm sorry I jumped the gun on the last one, but I would like to recommend the City Council pass a resolution approving task order number 3 with Terraconic Consultants, Inc. for LUST Stage 1 Site Environmental Investigation Services for OTRS number 2 in an amount of $43,600.
Second, Alderman Davalos.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Deputy Clerk Gravetti, will you give us the roll call on the vote, please?
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Krischel,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos,
Aye.
Alderman Widener,
Aye.
Alderman Ashour,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Barry,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Next item is again an informational update on Riggy Road and Barclay Drive, and Public Works Director Phil Cooper will introduce this topic. Welcome, Phil.
Good evening, thank you. You may recall that in June, City Council authorized staff and the City Attorney to draft easement documents to make Riggy Road and Barclay Drive city roads. The City Attorney has prepared a draft easement template and a draft easement agreement template. And the surveyor, who's been extremely busy this summer, has got around to the point where we can work on the easement exhibits, which should be completed in the next few weeks. Once the agreements are approved and executed, they'll be recorded at DuPage County. Now, when I presented this back in June, I had originally estimated this effort would cost a maximum of $5,000, and that was based on staff's experiences with a simpler project. As I've learned with working with the surveyor, he required title commitments, so city worked with a title company to obtain title commitments for the 10 properties, which cost $13,000. Then the surveyor's cost for the field work and the drafting of the easement exhibits, it totals $13,200. So the total cost is actually $26,200. No budget amendments necessary for this general fund expenses. There's sufficient funds budgeted in the fiscal year 22 budget to cover this. I just want to make sure that City Council was aware of the difference in costs, since I provided an estimate that was maximum of $5,000 and the actual costs are just over $26,000. So with that in mind, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Alderman Anderson, questions or comments?
No questions. I am supportive.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour.
Thanks for getting everybody together and taking care of the details with that group.
Thank you. Alderman Barry.
I have no questions, thank you.
Alderman Davalos.
I just have a clarifying question. I know we're just approving this cost, but I'm assuming the folks in Public Works and the city have been thinking about the CMRP with 2 more roads added. I guess that's in the budget for the CMRP at some level, maintaining those roads.
Well, right now, since the city doesn't own the roads, there's no CMRP money. There's nothing in the CMRP for it. My anticipation is, assuming everything goes well with them getting these easements approved and recorded, that we would use MFT money to resurface the roads. And then for the next 15 years, the CMRP would be, the roads would be part of the CMRP, and we'd be collecting funds to resurface them 15 years from now with CMRP funds.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, just to follow up a little bit on what Alderman Davalos is saying, and I think we have this issue sometimes, and maybe it's clear to staff what's going on, but it's not always clear to the council. And I think when you're talking about budgetary impact, the impact on the CMRP should be part of the budget, and maybe those kinds of figures, even if it's a long-term thing, and even if it's going to be funded through MFT funds, which otherwise would go to other city roads. I would appreciate having that information spelled out. Also, $13,000 for the title commitment seems high to me. Were there a lot of different properties involved? Because that might add a tad to it. Did you use Chicago Title?
There were 10 properties involved.
Ah, okay. Well, that makes sense. All right. No other questions.
Thank you. Alderman Krischel?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson?
No questions, thank you.
And Mayor Brummel?
I'm good. Thank you, Phil.
Okay. That was informational only. We'll move on to the next item, which is consideration of the 2022 road program engineering design contract. And again, Public Works Director Kugler will introduce this topic. Phil?
Thank you, Alderman. The fiscal year 22 budget includes a $30,000 CMRP expense for east side north of Galusha design. These streets, which are located east of Winfield Road and north of Galusha Avenue, will make up the entirety of the 2022 road program. Since they were last resurfaced in 2012, they have not held up very well. These are roads on the east side that were, in addition to being the roads north of Galusha, the roads south of Galusha were existing roads that over the years before the city became a city were not built to any sort of standard, and certainly not the current standards the city builds roads to. So the last time they were resurfaced, Public Works Superintendent Smith and Jamie Clark tried to beef them up a little bit, and that just wasn't successful. So we're going to take a different approach this time when they're paved, and we're planning on performing a significant amount of edge patching to get a nice thicker edge to the roads where those garbage trucks with their heavy loads are running right along the edge of the road. Those should be able to hold up better with the thicker road edge. And then we're also going to try to thicken up the pavement as a whole across the entire pavement. So the goal is to improve that pavement so it holds up for 15 years this next cycle instead of just 10. Staff did not have a construction budget estimate when we proposed the $30,000 expense in the budget. We've since estimated the construction is going to cost about $850,000. So the proposal included in the budget reflects the scope of work we plan on, construction work we plan on doing, and that's a proposal from Engineering Resource Associates for $46,650, which is appropriate considering that the $850,000 budget estimate for construction. There are sufficient funds available in the fiscal year 22 budget to cover this increase in cost because the 2021 road program, the museum painting and tuck pointing project and the storm sewer lining projects collectively are going to be at least $85,000 under the budgeted numbers. So there'll be plenty of money within the budget, so no budget amendment will be necessary for this. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Alderman Anderson?
No questions.
Alderman Ashour?
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Berry?
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Davalos?
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
Nothing from me.
Alderman Krischel?
I'm good as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson?
Good, I think you worked out well, Phil, thank you. No questions.
Okay, with that, Chair would entertain a motion from someone.
I'd like to make a recommendation to City Council pass a resolution approving a contract with Engineering Resource Associates for the design engineering services for the 2022 road program in the amount of $46,650 plus reimbursable expenses.
Second.
Second, Alderman Ashour.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Deputy Clerk Gravetti, would you read the roll call on the vote, please?
Alderman Weidner,
Aye.
Alderman Ashour,
Aye.
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos,
Aye.
Alderman Krischel,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 8 is to review and file the Community Development Department fiscal year 2022 work program update. Director Menser, do you have any comments to make on this report?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Any of the aldermen have any questions? Rather than going through the roll call, I would just ask any of the aldermen to express their questions or comments at this time. Oh, okay. Seeing none, we'll accept and file that. Move on to item number 9, which is to review and file the commercial space vacancy report. And again, if any of the aldermen have any questions or comments regarding this, kindly speak up at this time rather than going through all the roll.
Alderman Goodman, one very minor question, which is that the colors in the graph could be chosen better so we can distinguish between them. When they're printed in black and white, they just look exactly the same.
I think you need to repeat that. I think we're having trouble hearing that audio here. Could you repeat your comment?
Just that colors in the pie graph could be chosen better because in black and white, they look exactly the same. Just a minor thing.
Okay, so noted. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if not, we'll move on to item number 10, which is to review and file the bi-monthly code enforcement activity report. And do any of the aldermen have any comments or questions regarding this item? Please speak up. Okay, seeing none, we have nothing on the miscellaneous. There's one more motion needed this evening.
I move to adjourn.
Okay,
Second, Alderman Davalos.
do we have a motion and a second? Deputy Clerk Gravetti, will you form the roll call?
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Ashour,
Aye.
Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman,
Aye.
Alderman Krischel,
Aye.
Alderman Weidner,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention to these matters this evening, and thank you in particular to staff who did such a great job preparing all the materials necessary for our deliberation and our approvals. Thank you, everyone, and good evening.
Thank you. Good night.